In the last episode of this series, we covered in great detail the overall history of the Second Age in a much simplified form, specifically for the sake of understanding better just what exactly the Last Alliance is, as the Age of the Ring mod throws players directly into that scenario without providing any context, including a ton of deep cuts those who only know the films would be lost on. The Last Alliance scenario assumes players know such things going in, but many do not. So the video seeks to inform anyone on who the characters are, where they come from, the struggles they went through, and so on, which the films either do not address at all or completely change the context of. This video will finally delve into the War of the Last Alliance scenario itself, which is the second of the two historical scenarios the Age of the Ring mod adds to the War of the Ring mode that deals with other conflicts than what happens in the Lord of the Rings. The other scenario being the War of the Dwarves and Orcs, which I covered earlier in the series. The War of the Last Alliance scenario, for anyone not already familiar with it, pulls you deep into the time period in ways no other BFME game or mod does that I'm aware of, and so is worthy of being explored for all it's worth, being so revolutionary in its approach to adding fresh life to the controversial War of the Ring mode. There's a ton to cover, so let's jump in. The Last Alliance historic scenario can be played either solo or PvP style with another human player for a very tense and realistic game. Not only are you thrust in the latter days of the Second Age of Middle-earth, when the last alliance of elves and men were taking on Sauron, but the mechanics are a bit different. For starters, you're not able to build bases at all. Instead, the goal is to go around taking territories, both the unoccupied ones and those owned by enemy units, not just add up your territory bonuses in order to make your troops stronger, but also to gather up your allies, which are typically under siege somewhere and must be set free from those sieges. This is where some really deep cuts come in. Your allies are those taken from the books, but not just the LOTR books, but the posthumously published ones. So if you've never read those, you'll be shocked to find that King Durin himself is one of the allies, along with Amdir, former king of Lorien before Galadriel and Celeborn came to rule, and even Orofer, Thranduil's father. All of them are their own fully realized RTS heroes, with their own unique strengths, weaknesses, and abilities, and they even have their own voice lines. All of this incredible attention to detail really brings this scenario to life above and beyond what one might expect if you are someone who only knows the movies. A real love for the source material. But because you're not able to train new units, you are forced to be that much more careful with the units you do have. This makes this scenario easily the most tense and realistic one, and the most challenging. The more patient you can be, typically the more rewarded you'll be as well. And this scenario is limited in its scope of territories, so you can't go to the further south. Some other interesting restrictions on the map include the Western Territories, Erebor, and all of Rhûn in the far north. And only two territories connect the northern theater of war with the south. Gondor hasn't been fully developed as a nation at this point, so its territories only go to Dol Amroth in the west. It's great details like this, which make it feel like a legitimate Second Age scenario. You can see much more clearly here the blank regions which are all off limits. This is a slight stretch though, given that only a few cities in Arnor are described as being around at this time, and most likely just Minas Anor, Osgiliath, and Minas Ithil and their immediate surrounding areas in Gondor, but the rest would be fairly accurate to the books. However, Umbar is said to have been under Númenórean control by this time, and according to AOTR lore, the far southern fortress of Haidar would also have been. But it's easily possible that these more remote colonies would have been occupied either by corrupted Númenórean exiles or taken by the enemy, being so deep in its territories. There's even little things thrown in like portrait art and location descriptions to reflect the different times. Even though you can't go to several of them, it's a great touch. Khazad-dûm is shown as the wondrous city of lore, Osgiliath is in its prime, complete with the great bridge and dome that housed a Palantir, Minas Tirith is known as Minas Anor. And Mirkwood is Greenwood the Great, a location that not only you can go to, but which is totally different from its Mirkwood counterpart. everything is green and lush as it would have been in the Second Age. But the cream of the crop by far is Minas Ithil, which would later become Minas Morgul. This is how the city would have looked, or at least might have looked, before being corrupted, and it's even complete with its own tree. After the fall of Numenor, Minas Ithil was founded as one of twin cities along with Minas Anor, later renamed Minas Tirith. The brothers Isildur and Anarion were joint kings of Gondor, with Isildur ruling from Minas Ithil and Anarion from Minas Anor. A seed of the White Tree was saved from the downfall of Numenor by Isildur and planted in Minas Ithil, symbol of royalty by the Dunedain and of their connection to the High Elves and the Valar. When Minas Ithil was captured in the Second Age by the Nazgul, that white tree was burned, but not before a seed from it had already been planted in Minas Anor. After Sauron's fall in the Second Age, Minas Ithil was reclaimed but operated as no more than an outpost, guarding the passes into Mordor. But it eventually fell by the Nazgul one last time in the Third Age, becoming Minas Morgul, never again to be restored to its former glory even after Aragorn became king after the final overthrow of Sauron. The king ordered Minas Morgul to be cast down where it lay in ruin ever after. And as far as heroes go, as if it weren't enough to have the characters like Oropher and Amnir included, now Anarion, brother of Isildur, is finally included in the Last Alliance. Having played a major role in the founding of the kingdoms of Arnor and Gondor, he also played a key part in the 7-year siege of Barad-dûr during the Last Alliance before his untimely death before the gates of the Dark Tower itself. Without Anarion, there would likely not have been the Gondor we come to know, and perhaps no Minas Tirith either. As a great way of honoring his importance, a hidden gem in this scenario is to be awarded as a bonus from uniting the domain of Anarion. Very nice touch. It's little details like this which show just how much love the developers have for the source material. And at last we come to the heroes of the Last Alliance themselves. Quite a few of these legends in AOTR, much expanded on since the old BFME 1 prologue days, I'd say, and even an expansion upon AOTR's own version of the prologue in the single-player campaign. From left to right you have Anarion, his father Elendil, then his own son Isildur, and the last High King of the Noldor, Gil-galad. Then we have Oropher, King of the Woodland Realm, Durin, King of the Dwarves of Durin's line, and Amnir, King of Loranond. And as mentioned earlier, all the heroes of the Last Alliance have their own complete and unique set of abilities, voice lines, etc., and so are fully realized.
The Lord of Minas Ithil stands ready.
You'll notice, by the way, that King Durin's abilities are completely different from his normal skirmish abilities. Not only does this kind of attention to fine details bring this era to life that much more, but it shows the developers aren't being lazy. They could easily have done a copy-paste job with Durin or anyone else's abilities, but opted for the harder road. This is incredible gameplay value, and as you've seen so many times, this sort of thing recurs again and again. Truly remarkable. Orifer is the father of Thranduil, the father of Legolas. Orifer ruled the Woodland Realm until he fought in the Wars of the Last Alliance, where he died. Amdir is from the books, who was the king of Lothlorien in the days when it was known as Loranond. He was slain during the Wars of the Last Alliance. But the roster of heroes gets even better. 2 more heroes make their appearances as temporary summons. Amroth Amdirion, son of Amdir, who would go on to be a tragic figure in the legends of the elves. It is said Amroth was the first to have the idea for the elves to live high in the trees on platforms known as flets. Earlier in the Second Age, when the War of the Elves and Sauron took place to protect the Rings of Power, Amroth sent aid to Elrond. Later in the Second Age, after his father Amdir's death in the Battle of the Dagorlad during the Last Alliance, he ruled the land of Lorien until the middle of the Third Age when he fell in love with Nimrodel during the Angmar Wars. Being discontent to marry him in the lands of Middle-earth, he agreed to take her to the sea to flee to Valinor. Tragically, she was lost on the journey to the harbor. He waited for her return at the ships, but blown away by a storm, in his last despair to find her, he plunged overboard to swim back to shore, but was drowned in the attempt.
We keep alive the memory of Doriath.
And Thranduil, son of Orifer. Not only is this a deep cut from the books to have him in the Last Alliance, but one of his skirmish abilities complements this as well, Memory of Mordor, showing his traumatic memories of this war, which prompted his isolationism afterwards. This power works a lot like vanilla Aragorn's Army of the Dead ability, by the way, rather devastating to surrounding enemies. And here's where you can find these heroes in the world builder if you want to use them much more often. Given you cannot build bases, it's easy to assume you also cannot get any upgrades for your troops, but one of these heroes can give weapons upgrades. Orifer has a level 3 ability which does this, and the great thing is, those upgrades do transfer to the Living World map. Notice that no units have upgrades. You can just see Orifer providing upgrades to some troops here. And as you can see, those few troops now show they got weapons upgrades. No other hero provides any upgrades of any kind though, so he is an invaluable hero to keep alive, needless to say. It's just one more incentive to taking the time to do RTS battles. Furthermore, your heroes and troops, while they can level up and auto-resolve, they won't level up perhaps as much as you'd need them to by the end through only auto-resolve. As great as these heroes are, however, once they die on the field of battle, they are well and truly gone. You cannot bring them back to life even at the Citadel. Given this, there's a hefty risk to leveling them up in RTS battles, needless to say. A great challenge, though, and lots of fun. You can see here that I've lost Elrond, Isildur, and Anarion, but only my army leader Elrond can be brought back via the Living World map. I would be remiss now if I did not take a look at the new structures and the new units. Again, the detail given to little things like this is just so cool. Instead of your typical structures made of stone, you have the temporary ones of an army on the move, being tents and pavilions and little staging grounds, making it feel that much more like you're assembling an army across Middle-earth. You've got your Dunedain units in one tent for your cheaper swords, spears, archers, and the only cavalry, with a great attention to detail in the place of Dor and Eärnil in the description. And you've got your tent for the Noldor or High Elves of Lindon, near the Grey Havens. Of course, these are the more expensive elite units. For anyone not already familiar with AOTR, to get upper tier units in RTS battles in their War of the Ring mode is not something you can do with any other faction. More on that later in the series. And then you have your tent for constructing siege equipment. And here's just all of their abilities. You'll notice that the Noldor share many similarities with Rivendell's High Elves, which is appropriate.
Dunedain footmen, ready! We serve the High King.
We bring spears from Lindon.
By the way, check out this clip of audio.
WOTR must be destroyed.
This kind of linguistic detail is stunning. This reflects something from the books, that the Elves of Lindon were comprised of both the High Elves and the Grey Elves, both of these peoples playing significant parts in the history of the Elves, including during the Second Age and even in the Third Age. These specific Elves of Lindon speaking here were the Grey Elves, the Sindar, and this is reflected in how these units call the Dark Lord by the name they themselves gave him, Gorthaur. Whereas the name Sauron was given him by the High Elves, such as Gil-galad, who marched side by side with the Grey Elves in the Last Alliance. Linguistic accuracy in a BFME game. Amazing!
We serve under the wisdom of Gil-galad.
We bring bows from Lindon.
And you've got to zoom in for a second to just appreciate the fine detail of everything. Just remarkable. And at the end of it all is the Dark Lord Sauron himself. Destroy Sauron and you win the game. But none of the enemy positions move at all on the Living World map, so you are forced to confront the Dark Lord in the same spot every time, at Barad-dûr, and surrounded by a bazillion armies. And if your heroes all die, you lose the game.
Our people are in danger.
It cannot be. It's Sauron.
I gotta hide! There's no easy feeling!
The Dark Lord is every bit as intimidating as you would expect, and just as in skirmish mode, if you get him as the ring hero, he can one-shot your heroes with the one ring.
Isildur has been struck down.
Now, for the ultimate crazy people out there, as mentioned at the beginning of this video, you can also play the scenario PvP style. Obviously, it can only be between you and your buddy, no AI allies, but it's intimidating enough for the Last Alliance player. The odds are truly stacked against him for not only the reasons we explored earlier, but also because of various features such as how Mordor starts with 40 power points, but the Last Alliance with 0, and regional bonuses are comparable, 35% attack bonus, 30% defense bonus, and 40% experience boost for Mordor but 0 across the board for the Last Alliance. However, the Last Alliance player, if he's patient enough and works to free the lands from Mordor, can have better regional bonuses than Mordor and more power points come the end. Here's how much you can get when you take all territories. This will help you a ton for your final battle on the slopes of Mount Doom. In fact, the more territories of Mordor the Last Alliance player takes, the Mordor player's regional bonuses and power points drop further and further, as you would expect. So the tables turn quite a bit by the end. As you'll see in a minute, the greatly increased regional bonuses can really rock your world even with a small force taking you on. And this is made that much easier by the fact that the Mordor player cannot move at all, not even with various big heroes like the Witch King or Sauron. In fact, the Mordor player is hard-pressed to even be able to transfer troops from one territory to another, as most Mordor territories are maxed out in CP already. However, almost all Mordor heroes start at level 10. So the Mordor player has lots of nasty abilities right at his disposal. You can also see that other territories that don't have any units on them also cannot have units transferred at all, so there's also a coded limitation in all of this. So if you go to play Mordor, whether against an AI Last Alliance player or a human one, all you can do is just sit and wait for them to come to you. And just like with the Last Alliance player, you can permanently lose your non-army leader heroes. I didn't show before that this could be done in auto-resolve, not just in RTS matches. Notice that the armies which surround the one at the Black Gate have 1 or 3 Nazgul, and the one at the Black Gate has just 1 of them. So when my army at the Black Gate loses, that 1 Nazgul will not fill the ranks of the other armies. By the way, notice how much smaller Elendil's force is, yet the regional bonuses really help him carry the day. So you can see here that none of the other armies are bolstered by the Nazgul from the Black Gate retreating to any of them. However, unlike the Last Alliance player, Mordor can permanently lose their army leaders, even with territories to retreat to, in fact. A very unique take on the War of the Ring mode, for sure. So you can see here that the Witch King is supposed to stay with me, but... boom! Gone. So you can see there's a lot of give and take with these opposing factions' mechanics. Fairly unique take, for sure. Another really cool feature of playing Mordor, though, is that it gets lots of units from other factions, like the corrupt Entwives of the Dol Guldur faction, or its Nazgul hero, a lot of the Goblin faction's units like the Trolls, Fireworms, Mountain Giants, and more, or a ton of the Haradwaith units and heroes. They even get the Easterling Chariots, and these are only playable in the Rune Adventure or Alternate faction, and are based off of the Wain Riders talked about in the books. The Wain Riders were of the Easterlings, which plagued Gondor and other lands for millennia, especially during the Third Age, and in-game they are a force to be reckoned with, operating in many ways like the Dwarven battle wagons, buffing nearby troops while also having incredible trampling capabilities. Very deadly. Not to mention these guys look incredible in their bronze armor. For anyone not familiar with the AOTR Last Alliance scenario especially, it's a radical departure from anything you've seen in the War of the Ring mode to date. Furthermore, it goes above and beyond what you've seen of the Last Alliance scenario in the classic prologue for BFME 1 even. This all goes to revolutionize this mode in ways not seen anywhere else in the modding world for BFME, while also expanding upon the history and story itself to include very deep cuts from the books for a Last Alliance portrayal you'd be hard-pressed to find anywhere else. You don't want to miss it. This mode will soon be getting further expanded upon in a forthcoming update that will add even more great new content and mechanics, so stay tuned for that. I'll post the link for this article in the description. This is for an upcoming adventure or alternate faction version of The Last Alliance, which is amazing in and of itself, but the developers have said some new stuff from it will make its way into the War of the Ring scenario as well. But what about you? What do you think about all of these great overhauls for the Age of the Ring version of the War of the Ring? Have you played AOTR before? If not, why not? What's stopping you from taking the plunge into all of this amazing content? You'd be hard-pressed to find a more faithful representation of the source material in RTS form anywhere else. Especially an RTS that has this much actual Middle-earth content, so let me know down in the comments section below. By the way, if you like this kind of deep dive and want more great BFME analysis of its mechanics, check out these series of mine. There's the Attribute Modifier series where I break down in great detail how modifiers actually work, comparing the vanilla games to the massive overhaul the Age of the Ring mod implemented over them. I also break down the fire mechanic, concluding at the end of that series with a great talk on the mechanic from one of the developers of the game from way back when the BFME games were coming out. There's also the Stealth series, where I show how stealth really works, again comparing vanilla to AOTR, and the beginning of the unit analysis series with the Berserkers unit. I also have a growing library of tutorials on how to use the BFME world builder and how to mod, along with lots of great gameplay videos besides. Well, this about wraps up this video. In the next episode, I'll cover in detail the pros and cons of ROTWK's persistent unit mechanic, and even offer some ideas of my own on how it can be improved upon, as well as discuss some of the unfortunate limitations in the engine which prevent certain ideas from happening.